Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and you're all very welcome to webinar number 44 in our Irish Bioenergy Association webinar series. My name is Sean Fine, I'm the CEO of the Irish Bioenergy Association, and we're delighted to present to you this morning our webinar launching the Interreg Cascade project and updates from the Irish Biochar sector. Before we get into the content of this morning's webinar, just a few brief introductory notes. We're delighted to be joined this morning by a wide diverse group with many new people that we haven't had attend before in person at our webinars. So just by way of introduction, the Irish Bioenergy Association is the representative body for the bioenergy sector on the island of Ireland. And our work covers the main bioenergy sectors of biomass, biogas, biomethane, biofuels, biochar, wood fuels, and energy crops. Our main work is in the area of policy lobbying and advocacy, and we provide a lot of information and knowledge to many different stakeholders across the industry and beyond. We have a broad and diverse range of members, from farmers to foresters, small and medium enterprises, fuel suppliers, technology providers, consultants, semi-state bodies, and really anyone interested in the bioenergy sectors. We're also rolling out a number of research and development projects, including our EIP, Small Biogas Demonstration Programme, our Interreg Cascade project, which is the focus of this morning's webinar, but also our Just Transition funded, National Just Transition funded Midlands Bioenergy Development Programme. And we also roll out a wood fuel quality assurance scheme. If you'd like to find out more about the association, feel free to check out our website, where you get a lot of information and guidance documents. Our aim and objective is to work towards a sustainable energy future with bioenergy. Before I proceed to hand you over to Stephen, who will give this morning's webinar, just by way of introduction about our own work in the association from the perspective of the biochar area. We see ourselves as the representative body for the sector, as is the case across Europe, where most of the bioenergy associations have now incorporated a biochar element within their association from a membership and representative perspective. As an organisation, we have a diverse membership across the full supply chain in the biochar area, from biomass suppliers to biochar producers, to technology providers, to those interested in using biochar to create various different products and fuels, and a wide diverse range of external bodies and associations and individuals who are providing services to the sector. They could be technical services, analytical services, or laboratory services, or a wide range of various different contributions. IrBEA, we have a biochar and carbon products working group. We had our first meeting for 2024 last week. The chairperson of that group is Robert Johnston from IrBEA Fuels, and there are a number of we are looking at RD&D projects in the area. Obviously, a key part of this is it's a up and coming sector, is communication, advocacy, and outreach, and we have an ongoing engagement with various different government departments, but also we've also lobbied for the inclusion of biochar in the Climate Action Plan, and this has been achieved and it has been mentioned. And we're also a member of the European Association Bioenergy Europe, and Stephen and myself participate in the carbon dioxide removals working group. Just by way of information as well, in case some of you may not know, we do have a fact sheet series, and we have a series of fact sheets available. If you would like to find out more, they're available on our website. And we also published a fact sheet on the support scheme for renewable heat. And this is, as I said, number 44 in our webinar series, and we've covered a wide, diverse range of topics so far. Those topics span the various different bioenergy sectors, and are all available to view on our YouTube channel or on our website. So I would encourage you to go back and look at any of the previous webinars if you'd like to find out more of any of the specific topics covered. So this morning's webinar, we will have a presentation of what's involved in the Interreg project, what we're trying to achieve and hope from that, and then Stephen will give updates from the sector in terms of what is happening and who the key players are and the key areas and areas of opportunity. And then we will have Q&A from answering questions from our attendees. So I just see that some people have raised their hands. We will not be in a position to allow people to come in to ask their questions. So if you could please post your questions in the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. That would be really useful, and we will endeavour to answer as many of your questions as possible. So Stephen's presentation will take 25 minutes or so, or 30 minutes, and then we'll go to the questions straight after that. Our future webinar, our next webinar will be number 45. We usually, it takes place fortnightly on a Wednesday. So our next webinar will be on the last Wednesday of March. As this day 2 weeks, we're at the SEI Energy Show in the RDS. So unfortunately, would not be able to run a webinar in conjunction with that event. So our next webinar will be this day 3 weeks, on the last Wednesday in March from 9:30 to 10:30. And it's likely that it will be a topic around either feedstock or energy demand. And full details will be published through our social media channels in the coming week. So our speaker this morning is Stephen McCormack. Stephen is the project executive and our colleague in the Irish Bioenergy Association. He has a degree in environmental science from IT Sligo and a postgrad in environmental sustainability through University College Dublin. He joined IrBEA in 2020, having previously worked with the Western Development Commission on their redirect project. And Stephen is tasked within IrBEA with engaging with the growing number of stakeholders looking to develop the bioenergy and biochar sectors here in Ireland. So I'd now like to hand over to Stephen, who will take you through his presentation. Do you want to share your own slides, Stephen, or do you want me to share for you?
Sean, please. I'll share them.
You share your own slides, so I'll stop sharing. Okay. Okay, so it's over to you, Stephen.
Perfect. One moment now. I'll just get sharing. And if you can just confirm you can see my slides there,
yeah,
Sean?
We can see your slides perfectly, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks, Stephen.
Okay, so thanks, Sean. So thanks for the introduction. So I'm here today to chat to you a bit about our Cascade project, which is now officially underway. So first of all, it's co-funded by the European Union in the ERDF forum for Interreg Northwest Europe. And as you can see on the screen, the project is aimed at circular conversion cascades to transform residual biomass into carbon products, namely biochar. It's just one of the first projects to be awarded success in the new program period for Interreg Northwest Europe, and it actually builds upon work we've done so far in previous projects. So to expand on that point a little bit, just a little bit about the project journey through Interreg Northwest Europe to date. So with origins in both the Progress and Combine projects going back, I think as far as maybe 2008, the focus initially was on exploring valorization of underutilized biomass resources. Now, these included things like conservation grasslands, which were cut late in the season, or material derived from places like roadside verges, for example. Now, these projects developed process techniques, and part of the process involved demineralizing and pelletizing biomass for provision of both biogas, but also solid fuel pellets, which you can see pictured here in the middle. Then the Redirect project was the next project, which is where I joined in my previous role with the Western Development Commission. And it's indeed where IrBEA joined the project consortium as well. Now, this time there was an added step to the process chain, an extra step, which was namely a Pyreg pyrolysis unit. And that was done with the express aim to explore the production of biochar and activated carbons from these residual biomasses, similar to that pellet that you see there in the middle, that sort of biomass. When that project finished up, next came 3C, so creating a circular carbon economy, which was what it stands for. So that was exploring the uses of biochar for provision of products and services. So once you have created this biochar, what can you use it for? Where can you put it to good use? And what can it be? Yeah, how can it be used for provisions of goods and services? That project finished up last year, and then finally we are where we are now. So the Cascade project will continue the work across a range of applications, which we'll go through now in a few minutes. But at the heart of the project is a specific priority and a focus on the promotion and transitioning towards a place-based circular and resource-efficient economy. And the project will run till probably about mid-2026. And while some initial work actually was carried out in 2023, the bulk of the activities are actually ahead of us. Now, the project consortium, it consists of 7 partners from across Northwest Europe. So being led by the University of Kassel in Germany, who specialize in the areas of research of grassland science and agricultural cultivation. Next up, we have project coordination by Dr. Tim Schultz of Blink. So that's the Blended Learning Institute, also based in Germany, whose mission it is to develop innovative solutions to complex challenges and to offer new tools and formats for cooperation and development. Since 2005, they've been involved in over 50 European projects in different areas, but the focus on circular carbon economies is a key element for Blink. So next up, we have CEDEC. So they're based in Luxembourg. So there's a Council for the Economic Development of the Construction Sector. Now, CEDEC bring in additional expertise from the building sector, and they're the new central partner for all questions related to construction, housing, and indeed capacity building within this area. From Belgium, our project partners, formerly known as Pro Natura, but who have recently rebranded as Kimcrect. So they're a green management company based in Belgium that, among other activities, that they work with in the social economy space. So providing employment opportunities to those who might be in need, while also being one of the agencies that's used by the local authorities for green management, essentially. Then we have Uni La Salle, which is our second higher education partner based in France. So a center for education in earth, life, and environmental sciences. And then we have the municipality of Enschede in the Netherlands. So it's great to be able to work alongside a municipality as they have the scope and ability to deliver project activities on the local authority level. And then finally, IrBEA completes the partnership. Now, it's also worth noting that we had excellent partners from Wales over the past few years, both Aberystwyth University and Severn Y Energy Agency. Now, unfortunately, due to political reasons and Brexit, they could no longer directly be involved, but we're looking forward to continuing our working relationship with them. And in fact, they are continuing to develop their own biochar-based products locally in Wales. Now, so over the course of the previous projects, we've done numerous webinars, press releases, fact sheets, dedicated conferences, as well as study tours, demo days, and site visits, both here and across partner regions in Northwest Europe. And hopefully this has helped get the messaging out about how creating a circular carbon economy is created and what's involved. But I know from experience that the sector can be actually hard enough to explain, and especially for people to understand in a short space of time, especially if they're new to the topic. I'm just going to take the time now just to show our short project video, which actually does a really nice job in introducing the concept of a circular carbon economy based on biomass-to-biochar value chains, the provision of renewable heat, and the creation of products and services. Now, it's only 5 minutes long, but as I say, it does a really nice explainer, so I'll just play that for you now.
Annually, 37 million tonnes of residual biomass are wasted in Northwest Europe, which corresponds to a potential of about 2% of total CO2 emissions in Northwest Europe. The use and conversion of these waste biomasses into biochar is thus becoming an important strategy in the fight against climate change. In biochar, carbon can be stored for the long term. It can replace fossil coal and be processed into other products. This makes biochar the basic material of a circular carbon economy, which not only has a positive climate effect, but can also lead to sustainable economic and social development. However, the circular carbon economy is more than just a purely technical solution. It requires a well-thought-out, preferably local management concept in which 4 central elements and process steps are optimized and coordinated with each other. Biowaste is organic waste from private households, cities and municipalities, from gardening, forestry and agriculture, and residual biomass from nature conservation areas. This biowaste includes, among other things, green cuttings and hedge trimmings, roadside greenery, food scraps and residual wood. Biomass management here includes collection, transport, storage and pre-treatment of the biomass. Biomass is converted into biochar in pyrolysis furnaces in the absence of oxygen. This prevents the carbon from going into the air as CO2 and instead being stored in the coal. Pyrolysis produces thermal energy, pyrolysis gas and coal, which are used in the various plant systems in different quantities and qualities. The technological range begins with simple Contiki kilns, through small rural plants that fit well into local heating networks, and ends with high-tech carbonisation plants on an industrial scale, for example as components in urban waste treatment and sewage plants. Plant design and management are determined by the regional framework conditions, the availability of biomass input, the intended heat or coal production, and the targeted biochar quality. Biochar is the ideal feedstock for bioeconomy products and services. It has outstanding properties for water and nutrient binding and can be used in various industries. It is active in the filtration and purification of water and wastewater and can be used as a valuable soil substrate for gardening, agriculture and forestry. They are used as bedding in stables and for the reduction of odour nuisance in various industries, from medical technology to sanitation, and as an aggregate in the construction industry, clay plaster, concrete and asphalt. A sustainable carbon circular economy should be strategically planned. It makes sense to base this planning on necessary development scenarios, for example, climate-neutral urban planning, sustainable water management, water storing and heat-resistant cities. Promoting biodiversity, extensification of land, and for sustainable agriculture. The circular carbon economy must link all four areas in a sustainable way and implement them locally, based on the available biomasses, optimal plant design and biochar qualities. Product and value chains for the regional bioeconomy are being developed. It offers opportunities not only for climate protection and economic value creation, but also for socially and participatively oriented regional development in Europe.
Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed that. Now with that brief explainer video out of the way, I'll just touch upon what we hope to achieve during the Cascade project. So it's structured into 3 distinct work packages. Number 1 is focusing on piloting place-based activities across our 7 pilot regions. So in Ireland, we're going with County Donegal as our pilot region. We'll be exploring various feedstocks, collection methods, pre and post treatment methods, thermal conversion, and then of course, subsequent biochar use locally. And number 2 is looking at quality management systems. So we aim to develop quality management systems based on the local or regional conditions, explore best practices, and through that develop recommender systems for other regions so that they might learn from them and adapt them for their own uses. And then the third work package is focused on capacity building. So this is effectively aimed at increasing knowledge levels across a region and making them available to others through a variety of different methods. Now you'll see here at the bottom, in Ireland, we've 3 associated partners who will assist in the rollout of our project activities. So first of all, we've chosen Donegal due to it being home to Kilulta. So they were one of our members who were very active in our previous 3C project. And we're delighted that Donegal County Council was willing to participate as well within the project activities, Kilulta being based in Donegal, and we look forward to working with them. And then we have Biocarbon Ireland, scientific, a specialist consultancy based here in the Northwest with expertise in the sector. Oops, sorry, now skip too far. Now, so Kilulta, so with Ethan and the team in Kilulta, they're a social enterprise based in Falcara, just right on the coast, and they're focused on horticultural production. Now, they're home to historic greenhouses that used to service food markets in the 60s and 70s before falling into disrepair but these have been brought back into production in recent years and are providing fruit and veg locally. They've been involved in soil health projects, EIP projects. They run a variety of courses, and they're hopefully to be the site of the Northwest Bioeconomy Hub. So lots going on. They've also worked with a cohort of about 40 local farmers, exploring various different sustainable and innovative farming practices and trying to bring marginal land back into productive use where possible. They're also proud owners of a Contiki kiln, which you can see here pictured, and we hope to explore the possibilities of more sophisticated production equipment as the project progresses. It's also worth mentioning they're home to the MyGug micro AD unit, also pictured here. So they have an interest in both biogas and biochar on the small scale. So two actually very complementary bioenergy disciplines. In fact, biochar and digestate for the growth of plants is likely to go together extremely well. And there's also plenty of research evidence out there that shows that certain types of biochar can actually enhance the biomethane or biogas process, which in itself is very interesting. Now, if you look back on our YouTube channel, webinar number 30 was with Kieran from MyGug, and I'd encourage you to go back and have a look if you're interested in micro AD. And then our other associated partners, as mentioned, apart from Donegal County Council, are Biocarbon Ireland Scientific. So they're experts in carbon analysis, providing auditing and certification, analytical services, as well as specialist consulting. Formed by Brian and Robert back in 2021. They can assist you with your queries if you're wanting to get involved in the sector, and we very much look forward to working with them as we explore the various elements of the Cascade project. Now, at the core of the Cascade project are 7 predefined Cascade scenarios we're hoping to explore collectively during the lifetime of the project and beyond. Now, I'll touch upon them briefly. They're all covered by the 7 different pilot regions, but there's likely that there'll be a lot of crossover between regions as well. So the first scenario is sewage water cleaning and remediation services. As we know, biochar makes a really good filtration mechanism, and so we hope to explore that element. The next one is number 2 is scaling urban heat and biochar production. So combined heat and biochar production, it's as a concept is really, really interesting. There's a lot of excess thermal energy given off, and it should be put to good use where possible. Number 3 is looking at biodiversity in urban environments or semi-urban rural environments. Now where this comes in is the greening of our city environments, essentially with vertical walls, with green roofs, providing plants and then habitats for biodiversity to grow and flourish. Number 4 is looking at CO2 negative construction and building materials. So whether that's concrete, asphalt or tarmac. And so we're looking forward to exploring those again. And number 5 is looking at the so-called sponge cities or permeabilization of cities to manage rainwater. So this is incorporating biochar within permeable subsurfaces that allow the water to be filtered and trickle down into the groundwater, getting cleaned as it does, and prevents flooding further on downstream if it was just concrete that was falling onto, for example. Number 6 is what we're hoping to do in Ireland. So alternative rural input materials and biochar for agri-horticulture scenarios. So this is using residual biomass from our countryside and from horticultural applications and from rural farm enterprises, and putting them to good use, turning them into biochar and then reapplying them locally. And then finally, number 7, we're hoping to look at social economy scenarios. So how can the community or people be involved within the circular carbon economy? So there are the aims of the projects. As with all the previous projects, there's an openness to exchange ideas, become involved or participate in workshops and site visits over the course of the next few years. And perhaps you're based in Donegal and like to be involved, just get in touch with me directly. My details will be at the end of the slides, and you can contact me through the IrBEA website. And even if you're not based in Donegal, but you'd like to participate in some fashion, please feel free to get in touch. My door is always open. Now, just before I move on to give you an update on the Irish biochar sector, I just wanted to point out, while the 3C project is actually finished up, we decided to keep and maintain the 3C network, which we had built up, and we hope to build upon it and expand upon it moving forward. You can access this through our website, 3c.eu. And this network will be assisted through cooperation with Biochar Zero, who are one of our associated partners from Germany, and they're specialist biochar consultants and brokers. So the 3C network, as I say, we hope to continue and build upon going forward. Now, so that's a little bit about the Cascade project. Obviously, it's 2.5 years to run yet. Now I'm just going to provide you with a brief update on the Irish biochar sector and just some of the key stakeholders involved. Now it's not an exhaustive list, but just I thought I would provide you with a brief update on some of the key players. So first up, we have Dan and Lalita and the team at Cygnus, who offer a variety of different biochar analysis and testing packages, alongside other specialist biomass analysis. Now the team are not long back from presenting at the US Biochar Conference in Sacramento in California, to which they were invited by Kathleen Draper of the International Biochar Initiative, who actually presented at her own National Bioenergy Conference there in last October in Dunleary. You'll find a recording of her presentation on our YouTube channel. I'd encourage you to watch it back as well. Now, if you have any questions about biochar testing or specific trials, I'd encourage you to get in touch with Cygnus. Next up, we have Morris and the team at Greenbelt, who continue to explore how biochar production and use can be a part of sustainable forest management practices. So that's both from a feedstock supply, as well as how biochar can be used within reforestation and afforestation planting stages, and its potential to improve plant viability, but also improve nutrient and water retention, for example. And then we have Eddie and Raymond of Heat Systems, now under the name Carbon Clean. They're located in the old bacon factory here in Claremorris. And what you can see pictured here is one of their TR kilns being delivered on site last year. And now they'll be servicing the activated carbon market here in Ireland, but also exploring various different biochar feedstocks and uses, as well as the thermal processing of different feedstocks. Now, in addition to his work with Heat Systems and Carbon Clean, Ray McGrail has been using his training as an architect to explore biochar amended 3D concrete printing as a means to produce intricate 3D concrete printed objects. Now, we ran some initial material testing last year, and we hope to revisit this again this year. It's a very interesting application for biochar. Next up, and on the smaller end of the scale, and what I would see as an absolute gap in the market, it's Christopher Hayes from Carbon Resources, who have begun manufacturing of the retorts you see here on screen, based down in Rosscarbery in Cork. Now, these units may be ideal for farm use or cooperative uses. There's scope for wood vinegar recovery as well with these units. And there's a lot of interest for smaller, more affordable production units. So I'd encourage you to get in touch with Christopher if you're interested in finding out more. Next up, pictured here, is an example of what's known as a rock kiln designed by Dr. Paul Anderson. So this one was built by Robbie McDonough of Forum Connemara. So this is part of their efforts to try and control and eradicate just some of the invasive species, which we all know as rhododendron, which are causing untold issues across our national parks and forests. So as a plant, it's pretty to look at, but it's very difficult to manage. So Robbie and his team were able to turn some of this problematic species into stable biochar, which can then be used for other applications. Next up, we have Mark Hanley, now trading as RT Biochar Ireland, located just out the road from here in Strokestown and Roscommon. So Mark and Morris from Greenbelt brought over an Artichar pyrolysis unit from America. I'd say it's probably close to 5 years ago. And Mark had previous experience in the provision of peat and growing substrates for the mushroom and horticultural industry. A few years ago, he got into wood supply instead, and now he's come full circle again, and he's pretty much focused on delivering biochar enhanced green compost as a direct peat replacement for the horticultural sector. He's also hoping to position himself as the sales agent for spare parts for Artichar units within Europe. So this will hopefully assist in keeping any of the Artichar units operating and keep downtimes to a minimum, because it'll shorten the supply chain for spare parts coming from North America. So I would encourage you to check out Mark's website. Next update, we have Davy Robinson of Origin Biochar. Now, Davy has developed a range of certified animal feed additives based on biochar, which he's producing himself. He operates a biomechan pyrolysis system, and he's also the sales agent for the technology both here in Ireland and in the UK. So if you have an interest in biochar as an animal feed additive, he's the man to talk to. Next is a brand new offering from Ireland, this time coming out of IrBEA. So Conor Donnelly and the team at AIC are producers of waste-to-energy systems. But they had a request from a customer in the US to develop a mobile system for biochar production. And so they built and delivered the Phoenix unit you see pictured here. So it's a very impressive piece of kit. and it'll certainly lend itself nicely to use within certain sectors. It can be brought on site. As you can see, it's track mounted. And then last but no means least, we have the team at IrBEA Fuels. So they've been developing harvest flame coal products over the last close to a decade now, I guess, which is made from torrefied olive stones. Now, they took delivery of the 2 new reactors last year, which you can see on screen. And so as a result, they are now home to the largest throughput capacity in Europe. So they're capable of processing 70,000 tons of biomass per year. Now, the same production process that makes their biofuel is used to produce their OS80, which is high quality, 80% fixed carbon biochar made from olive stones. This is a really great success story for the sector here in Ireland. And of course, aside from these companies, we have numerous individuals dotted around the country who are committed to the idea of biochar for various different reasons. We have the likes of Bernard Carey and Emer from the Biochar Co-op, who have been advocating its usefulness for years now. We have a number of committed farmers and foresters, including Farming for Nature ambassadors, both past and present, all extolling the virtues of biochar use within farm and forestry systems. And then, of course, there are those involved in the research side of things, doing their bit to increase the knowledge around the sector. There's projects like Inform Bio at MTU, or indeed the Emerge project at UCC. We attended actually a Teagasc AD anaerobic digestion research seminar last year. It was really encouraging to see actually biochar increasingly form part of these research topics. Last year, we also saw SEAI fund a dedicated call on pyrogenic carbon capture and storage. And also, I know from speaking with various higher education institutes that there's an appetite to explore biochar research topics from many of our universities, including from Dublin, from Galway, and further afield. And then we have the likes of organisations like IrBEA in Northern Ireland, the Agri-Food and Bioscience Institute, who continue to explore biochar use. But obviously, we need more Irish research and development, particularly for its role within agriculture. Okay, so that was just a brief update on some of the key stakeholders within the sector. I just wanted to touch briefly upon the current policy situation. So after a number of years of repeated submissions and lobbying activity, both from IrBEA and its members and industry stakeholders, we were delighted to finally see the inclusion of biochar within the draft Climate Action Plan 2024, which was published just before Christmas last year. Now, we see this as a very, very positive step in the right direction. However, there's more work to do to see this materialize into tangible policy recommendations. And within the document, there's a section on as of yet unallocated carbon emission savings that will need addressing ahead of the rollout and development of the second carbon budget, which is for the period of 2026 to 2030. As you can see on screen, the report or the draft identifies 2 distinct carbon removal methods as emerging as potentially promising. So these are biochar and bioenergy carbon capture and storage, or BECCS. Now, we've known for a good few years at this stage that the IPCC identified biochar as a promising negative emissions technology capable of CD or carbon dioxide removal at scale. Now, what we know now, I guess, is that it's one of the more scalable and cost-effective methods we have at our disposal, but it will require significant development for it to be meaningful. And this is where you can have your say. So currently, the consultation process is open to submissions on the draft Climate Action Plan. And so I would encourage you all to make a submission. As you can see from the Annex of Actions, there will be a carbon removals working group will be established by Q2 of this year. And as Sean mentioned in his introduction, IrBEA has within its membership a dedicated biochar carbon products working group chaired by Dr. Robert Johnson. So we look forward to being able to contribute to the discussion. Now, the submission closes on this on April 5th, and IrBEA, as a representative organisation for the sector, will seek to represent the industry within this working group. And then the next interesting piece of legislation and policy is more at a European level, and it's the Carbon Removal Certificate Framework, or CF for short. Now, this, in case you weren't aware, passed the trilogue discussions at a European level just in the last fortnight. And it, following submissions by ourselves, but also industry stakeholders and working groups from across Europe, we were delighted to see changes to now allow biochar carbon removals feature within the document. So just briefly, the CRCRF categorizes carbon removals into three key areas. So the first one is carbon farming, which we hear a lot about. So this is soil carbon and afforestation or reforestation. The next one is permanent carbon storage and removal, and this is where biochar carbon removal fits, direct air carbon capture and storage fits, enhanced rock weathering, and also BECCS, bioenergy carbon capture and storage. And then third category is carbon storage within products such as wood-based construction materials and concrete. Now, all of these will be subject to quality criteria. So that stands for quantification, additionality, long-term storage, and sustainability. That's done to ensure the effectiveness. What we now know is that 90% or over 90% of all the durable removal credits that were delivered in 2023 were actually biochar based. So that just shows you biochar is actually doing the heavy lifting of carbon removal credits that are being traded presently. And then just this week, we saw some new studies exploring the costs of direct air capture and storage. It's very costly, and the prices are unlikely to reduce quickly enough where it'll actually fall below $200 per ton. So the reality, biochar carbon removals is something we already have access to. It just needs further development for it to be meaningful. Now, just before I finish up, I'd like to draw your attention to some work IrBEA did on behalf of the Department of Ag in late 2022. So it was a feasibility study to explore the sustainable management of agricultural green waste in Ireland. Now, this work was carried out in light of farm-based exemptions coming to an end, which had previously permitted open burn piles as a management technique. This practice is now prohibited. So among other obvious routes for this material to be used, including firewood recovery or chip or mulch, biochar was identified as being a sustainable alternative management practice. So we strongly made the recommendations that any farmer wishing to produce their own biochar for use on farm using this type of hedgerow material should be allowed to do so. Now you can access the report through our website or through the QR code on the screen, and you can also watch back on our dedicated webinar on the report, which I think was webinar number 41, again, available on our YouTube channel. So lots going on in Ireland, but lots more to be done for the sector to grow. I've just listed a few, some of the few areas we as an association hope to progress, and which are probably necessary to be worked upon for it to be for the sector to materialize and mature over the coming decade. So these areas, just to touch upon them briefly, are policy and regulatory framework development, research and development, which is ongoing, of course, market development and commercialization, so very important aspect of it, infrastructure investment and capacity building, promotion, collaboration and knowledge exchange, and then monitoring, evaluation, and policy adaptation as we go forward. Now I see a lot of IrBEA members in the webinar, but also a lot of key stakeholders with involvement with the whose involvement with the association would actually benefit both themselves, but also IrBEA and the sector. So please do contact us if you're interested in becoming a member and being involved. So I think with that, that's the end of my slides. Thanks very much for listening. You can contact me at the email address here. The Twitter account that's linked is our Irish Cascade project activities. There's also a LinkedIn page for the wider consortium, which you can find, you'll just find it through searching. So with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Sean, and thanks for listening.
Thanks very much, Stephen, for your presentation, and very detailed and lots of information there. Just a reminder for all of our attendees that the recording of this webinar will be available on our YouTube channel and also on our website afterwards, so you can get access in the next day or two, so you can get access to all the slides via the recording. So Stephen, if we maybe just go back a few steps in terms of and maybe take a few questions. So just a reminder for any of our attendees, if you'd like to ask a question, please drop them into the Q&A tab on the bottom of the screen. So just to kick it off, Stephen, just a question there around, it's a basic question, but something that might confuse people, the difference in pyrolysis and combustion. So just to explain the differences, because, you know, people would be familiar with combustion technology, but mightn't necessarily be familiar with pyrolysis technology. So could you just explain the difference in the two approaches?
Absolutely. I suppose, well, first and foremost, pyrolysis tends to happen in the absence of oxygen. Now, as we all know, combustion requires oxygen or access. The fire needs access to oxygen for material to burn. When you apply heat to a material from the outside in a sealed reactor, for example, it begins to off-gas volatiles, which are then themselves the combustible part. So it's more of a thermal conversion process with the express aim of having a stable, high carbon content material left rather than a pile of ashes at the end. So the idea is not to reduce the material down to ash, but it's to convert it into a stable form of carbon in the form of biochar or indeed charcoal.
Okay. And just on that, Stephen, just on that, sorry to cut across you. Just on that, then, just another question there about the opportunity for bio oil and syngas and waste heat or renewable heat, and that's the interest from a bioenergy perspective. In that, biochar is the solid output, but there are potentially other outputs as well, and we have seen across Europe bio oil plants, for instance, production facilities, and indeed production facilities producing syngases as well. So can you just explain the outputs and how they arise?
I suppose at the very simple chemistry level, so when you apply heat to any biomass, typically you'll give off a number of products. So one will be a bio oil, which again, its volatiles being driven off. That tends to be combustible. And then there's also a syngas or a biogas, some people will call it, but this tends to be a mixture of hydrogen, carbon monoxide, some methane. And again, of course, this is combustible. So these are the volatiles that are being driven off, both combustible byproducts. Now, depending on the type of equipment that you use to actually produce your biochar, you can play with the parameters so that you're getting mostly combustible syngas, for example, and these tend to be gasification systems, where the yield of biochar will be quite low. Or if you're focused on, for example, production of bio oil, you might have very little biochar production at the very end, but might get a lot of bioliquids off it, which again are very combustible. Some rather interesting pilot plants we've visited over the years where they've been focusing on, as you say, different aspects. And so the actual pyrolysis production process tends to give off a lot of excess thermal heat, assuming that your feedstocks are dry and in the first place. And this heat can and should be put to good use, integrated into heat networks, for example, or used to sustain the reaction, or used to provide process heat, or indeed into dry incoming feedstocks. So depending on what energetic output you want, or what yield of biochar you want, there's different parameters at play, essentially.
Okay, I think you have addressed that question very well. The next one, Stephen, is around your video focused on waste biomass streams, but also there's an opportunity potentially here for sustainable forest management thinning material to be utilized. So just, do you want to explain that it's not all, or the question is about whether there's opportunities beyond the waste biomass streams, if you know what I mean?
Absolutely. So within forestry operations, thinning material, which can be chipped and be used, mightn't necessarily lend itself to timber production. So material that is needed to be managed and harvested as part of sustainable forest management, so that you end up with a good crop of timber at the end. This material lends itself particularly well. Any sort of woody biomass can be used for the provision of biochar. In fact, this material is probably the most widely used. But obviously, it's not just from forestry operations. There's other sources of woody biomass. As the video alluded to, there's roadside verges, there's landscape management material, there's municipal green management material that typically either gets cut and rot or cut and burnt. So if you can take some of this material and put it to good use by providing a source of biochar, but also a source of renewable heat, it makes the use of that material more sustainable, because you're getting more value out of it. Obviously, if it's left to rot, some of it will go back down into the soil, but most of it will end up going into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide, for example. Yeah.
Okay, just to remind our attendees to continue to post in your questions in the Q&A tab if you have any. Another question, Stephen, is you mentioned the bioeconomy in your presentation. Can you just outline, what you define as the bioeconomy, and then how biochar production and use could fit into that overall sector, or up and coming or emerging area?
Yeah. So the bioeconomy as a concept can actually touch upon nearly all sectors of society and industry. So at its heart, it's the use of biogenic resources for provision of goods and services. Typically displacing something that might have traditionally been used from fossil sources. So that can be everything from things like chemicals for solvents to things like plastics to everything in between, fiber, fertilizers, anything and anything that could be switched from fossil-based to bio-based. Now, obviously, these sort of products are developed using biomass resources, and so the access to supply chains that provide biomass in the first place, the same supply chains obviously can service biochar production facilities. A lot of these facilities, biorefineries, as we know them, have large heat requirements. So co-location within these systems for pyrolysis can actually enhance and provide heat to sustain these biorefineries. But then when biochar is produced, it's a very stable form of carbon, and we can then start putting this into products that might have traditionally been made out of plastics, for example. We were at the Bio 360 Expo in Nantes in France a few weeks ago, and there was a really interesting company there that was making bioplastics, which was 95% wood chip biochar, which was ground very, very fine, with a 5% polymer binder, and they were 3D printing with this bioplastic filament, just as an example of a bioeconomy application where biochar is incorporated. But yeah, there's many different bio-based products and services that could be developed with biochar at its heart within the construction aggregates material. So as a direct replacement for aggregate, or even within asphalt, which one of our partners in the municipality in Enschede has done trials where they've replaced aggregate and bitumen with biochar and linseed oil, for example. So a bio-based alternative to traditional bitumen, asphalt, and tarmac. So
there's a question actually, Stephen, on that there around the concrete and the use of biochar in construction materials. Maybe just explain the background as to what biochar is achieving by incorporation, or what's it actually doing?
So if you think about biochar, a good rule of thumb, say for wood chip biochar, roughly every unit of biochar is equivalent to roughly 3 units of CO2 sequestered. So for example, if you had a ton on average of wood chip biochar, for example, that would be equivalent to roughly 3 tons of CO2 sequestered. So that's what makes it a promising negative emissions technology capable of actually carbon dioxide removals. Now, while biochar use within agriculture in particular is of interest, its use as an aggregate replacement within the construction sector, or as an amendment or an additive within, say, concrete, allows the carbon that's sequestered within that material to actually be sunk into new construction projects. So development of new roads, for example, if you can sequester a certain amount of CO2 within the biochar, within the aggregate that goes into the foundations of the new roads, you're actually sinking carbon into that new road, and in certain circumstances, if the carbon accounting stacks up, it can turn, say, new construction products into a carbon sink rather than a net emitter. Now, obviously, we know concrete in particular is quite a carbon intensive industry. So anything that can be used to decarbonize it should be encouraged. And there's many companies working on exploring biochar-based additives that can be used to actually improve the structural integrity of concrete. Now, not all biochars will be good for this, but there are companies that are absolutely exploring and developing and commercializing biochar-based additives for concrete. Its use within 3D printing, for example, we explored the olive stone biochar incorporation with 3D printing mortar mixes, where it acts as a direct aggregate replacement. But you can get it up in high enough percentages for it to become a carbon sink rather than a carbon emitter. So when you do the carbon bonds, so it's quite an interesting application, absolutely.
And I see some of our colleagues from Europe who are involved in the concrete research sector on our webinar this morning. Just a question then around agriculture and the use of biochar. In this particular question, commercial tillage soils, many of which may be low in carbon and with possible structural problems. So does biochar present an opportunity in these types of soils, is the question, Stephen?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So definitely within the agriculture sector, we see huge promise, and we see a lot of research and development taking place globally. But obviously we would love to see more Irish field trials conducted. Now, the incorporation of biochar raw, or so unamended, is not recommended for soils. So before applying to tillage soils, I would encourage that it would be mixed either as part of a composting product or added to slurry tanks, for example. And then absolutely
so loaded with nutrients, basically.
Loaded with nutrients, absolutely. You can improve in the carbon content, but also with nutrient content and retention. It can add as act as a buffer in times of drought stress. And yes, absolutely, it could help with structural problems within the soil. So it can provide a bit more.
So
structure.
Cascading use obviously is important. So, for instance, if you could, I know there's a producer, as you profiled on your presentation, producing animal feed biochar. So if you were to feed biochar to animals, they would get the benefits of the biochar from the point of view of ruminant function and other things. And then they would obviously, that would be excreted through their dung, and that dung then would be spread on land, and then that would, so you'd be promoting, and I think we'd generally be promoting a cascading use as much as possible. Is that correct? Or?
Absolutely. And its use within, say, manure management in particular, and farmyard manure in particular, and animal winter bedding. We see lots of people trialing mixing biochar in with straw and wood chipping, and that has a twofold function. So first of all, it can reduce ammonia emissions. It can make for a more pleasant animal bedding experience for the animals themselves, because it binds up and kind of soaks up some of the excrement, and then when you muck that out and allow it to compost, essentially you're enriching the biochar with nutrients. So you're reducing the amount of volatiles and ammonia that are being emitted to the atmosphere, but also you're enriching the biochar, so that when you come to land spreading it or incorporating it into your soil, for example, it'll be a highly nutrient-rich, carbon-rich material, which is really good for soil. Yeah, absolutely. So co-benefits.
A question there, Stephen, on the carbon farming framework. You outlined, I think, the broad background to it, and the role and potential for biochar. So I think the question is, what's the next steps here from a carbon farming framework potential? And just before I bring you in on that, just to say that we started our campaign around inclusion of biochar in this framework at European level a number of months ago with our conference back in May in Carrick-on-Shannon. We also we lobbied Colin Markey MEP, who was a representative of the European Parliament on the carbon farming removals committee or grouping. So we'd like to acknowledge the work of Colin in terms of taking on board our points that we made around the need to have biochar included. So Stephen, do you want to just outline the next steps? I think it's at a trialogue stage, or it's gone through the trialogue stage. So
yeah,
you outline the next steps from there. That's a question.
I think a version of the final text will be released in the next month or two. I know next week we are meeting with our Bioenergy Europe counterparts, who have a dedicated working group on carbon removals, and they will be providing us with a little bit more insight into the next steps. But the final text essentially has passed, but it'll be released in the next few weeks. Now, eventually, the idea is that the carbon farming mechanisms will allow people in the agricultural sector to benefit from providing carbon sinks, but also people in the biochar removal space will allow monetary gain, essentially, or some sort of a reward system for incorporating and producing biochar. Now, it's eventually the hope is that these sort of systems will be able to integrate with the European emissions trading scheme, but that probably won't happen until close towards the end of the decade. So there's a bit of work to do, but
so the Irish government has to take this framework and develop their own proposition around carbon farming. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. And there was a consultation that they put out before Christmas as well, which we fed into as well. But yeah, it's likely that biochar will just form one part of carbon farming. There's obviously other methodologies at play, like changing farming practices, increasing hedgerows, all that sort of stuff. So biochar will absolutely feed into it as one key component.
Okay, just a final question. And again, if there is any final questions, we're coming to the end. We have only 2 minutes left. But if anyone has any final questions, please post them in and we'll try and answer them as quickly as possible for the end. But just one other question there, Stephen, around the technology development aspects and the technology sophistication piece. You know, there's low-tech technology and very high-tech technology. So it's a question around the costs and the, I suppose, opportunities and challenges associated with each of the different levels of sophistication from the perspective of the technology.
Yeah, so as you saw in the video, there's a range of different scales that you can become involved in biochar production, from the individual and community level with simple Contiki kilns, which are slow pyrolysis. If they're done right, to produce really high carbon content and quality biochar. So they're affordable. There's places like the Ithaca Institute in Switzerland that provide open source plans on how to develop these simple kilns, and they're very effective. But then you have the medium sort of farm-based systems like the Biomass, which they're fantastic, and they can be integrated into heat networks, but they're a bit more expensive than obviously the more affordable options. But the scope is there to have really good integration with heat networks, which is exciting in itself as a proposition. And then on the higher end of the scale, there's obviously the high-tech carbonization plants or industrial pyrolysis systems, capable of large throughput. Now they're multi-million plants. They're not the preservative the average Joe soap. Unfortunately, they take years for development, but we need to see sort of a rollout at all scales for it to be meaningful, I guess. There's only a certain there's only a small amount of production to date. Realistically, across Europe, I think it was 100,000 tons were produced last year. Realistically, to scale it up to the gigaton scale in terms of CDR and helping us reach our net zero targets, we will need massive development of more and more plants across Europe. But look, we're heading in the right direction. People are talking about it. We're seeing more and more plants come online, and there's more appetite out there to turn residual biomass into a form of carbon sink and then put it to good use for a variety of different applications, from agricultural to farming to environmental applications. Yeah.
Just a comment in there, Cloak Carbon are leading the work on high quality biochar methodology and integration within the agricultural sector in Wales. So working closely with the Welsh farming unions and Welsh government to shape policy and roll out at all scales. So lots of alignment here. So it's good that you could have joined us, Kai, and we're also working very closely with Welsh partners that were involved in the Interreg projects with us over the years. And I guess that you are probably in touch with the same people. If not, please get in touch and we can make introductions and link you up. Just a final question, Stephen. We're over time, so this is the final question. Here, just asking you to elaborate on what the green waste feasibility study was and the biochar aspect that was highlighted or within that.
Yeah, so just to elaborate briefly, so in case you weren't aware, I guess up until November of last year, there had been an exemption that was allowed for farming, people involved in farming, that they could notify their local authority that they were going to conduct an open burn pile, essentially as a management practice for hedgerow management, landscape management material that needed, from a volume reduction point of view, some sort of treatment. Now, from an air quality perspective, this practice was only ever going to continue for a few years, and now it's been phased out. So from now on, essentially, you're no longer allowed set fire to open burn piles, which, you know, fair enough. That's grand. We were tasked with exploring sustainable potential alternatives for this material. So, what can farmers do with this material other than what they've previously been allowed to do? So we identified a number of different obvious avenues for use of this material. So everything from sale offsite for firewood recovery, for chipping. The simplest method was, from a volume perspective, was flailing, which, you know, you have to balance biodiversity considerations with hedgerow management. But obviously, we said that biochar production and use of this woody material in particular lends itself really, really well to a suitable source of woody biomass for biochar production. Now, this was just one recommendation out of a whole suite of recommendations as possible viable alternatives. So that report, you can access it through our website. It's a very in-depth and detailed report.
And on the Department of Agriculture website,
and of course,
as well.
As well.
Okay, Stephen, I think that concludes the question. So thanks to all our attendees this morning for attending and for showing interest in our project and also in the topic. I'd like to thank you, Stephen, for preparing the presentation and delivering it. I'd like to also acknowledge the work of Teresa O'Brien, our colleague in the Irish Bioenergy Association, for her work in organising the webinar and getting it all set up and helping us to run it smoothly. So thanks, Teresa, for your efforts. I think we'll conclude on that, just to say we look forward to welcoming you all back again for a future webinar. And if you would like to look back at any previous webinars, they're all available for you there as a resource. So with that, we will say good day and leave you for now. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.